What we're talking about today is the work that you guys do beyond the church walls, the roles you play in our community and in trying to keep the community together, lift the community up, and develop the community. That's a role that Black pastors, of course, have played for a really long time. But I want to give both of you a chance up front to just talk about what that role looks like in Detroit in 2021 amid a pandemic, amid all of the other things that touch down on our lives. What role are you called to play these days? Bishop Ellis, I'll start with you.
Well, I'm carrying on a 25 years now legacy from my father, who pastored for 34 years, and he was the first to move beyond the walls of the church in terms of a daycare center, Montessori daycare center, and then a Christian school that went from kindergarten to the 8th grade, and then apartments, duplexes that allow people to live in affordable housing, and then the credit union, federally chartered credit union, and that was like, wow, we're a bank now, and so he was the one to see beyond the walls of the church and to see that people had more than spiritual needs, but they had natural needs. And it kind of was a transition because before he passed, I was the one that wrote the grant that received $5.3 million from HUD to build Ellis Manor that is here on the new site. So it was kind of like a transition. And 2 years after we moved the first residents in 94, my father passed, made his transition. And of course, 5 years later in 2002, we moved into this facility, 6 years later, I should say. So I'm just carrying on that legacy. And I used to brag here in a good way that we did more ministry here at our present site outside of the church during the summer months than we did inside of the church. And now we're pretty much doing almost everything outside of the church. So we've gotten a head start, making sure that we ministered outside of the church. We didn't want to have a great party inside and nobody even knew we existed, except for the members of the congregation. So we've tried to specialize for years, going beyond the walls and ministering to people outside of these confines of Greater Grace Temple.
Yeah. Reverend Adams?
Yes, and it's really divine providence that we would be on the show together, Bishop Ellis and myself, because his father and my father were contemporaries and colleagues and very good friends. And they did a lot of the same work, housing. We developed, Bishop Ellis was a forerunner to that in a lot of housing development around the church. And we also continued that tradition, and we just completed a senior village right adjacent, almost Northwest Activity Center, $16.5 million project cooperatively with Presbyterian Villages of Michigan, providing apartment-style housing and cottage-style housing right there for those who did not want to live in the suburbs, but yet have quality housing in the city of Detroit. Also, we have tried to ignite employment opportunities through economic development. So on the church property, there is a adjacent development corporation entity in the church, but it's church property basically, where we have a Kentucky Fried Chicken, Long John Silver, Subway, McDonald's. Also, we developed the land that Home Depot now sits upon. It originally was a Super Kmart. And also the Checkers Hamburgers, we developed, that is presently on church land as well as the Davis Brothers, who are our institution within the city of Detroit as African-American Black businessmen. They were pioneers, and they are second generation entrepreneurs. Actually, I think I talked to Vincent Davis. I think he might be third generation pioneers, but they own the Shell station and the auto body shop. The auto body shop is on our land as well, because there is an ethos that we walk into that our forerunners walked into as well. And that was the church being a part of the revitalization of the community. Second Baptist Church at one point was the main Baptist church in the city, and its pastor, Reverend Bradley, was considered to be a employment agency in and of himself. In her book, Faith in the City, Dr. Angela Dillard talks about how Ford depended upon Second Baptist leadership and their pastor in particularly to recommend people for jobs at Ford during the Great Migration, and then also to settle disputes. We didn't have unionization. So he sent to the west side of Detroit a pastor who pastored Hartford Memorial Baptist Church, Hartford Avenue at that time for 2 years. Charles Andrew Hill came after him, pastored for 48 years, and started, UAW Local 600 was started in the sanctuary of the church. He also fought for fair housing, had W.E.B. Du Bois to lecture at the church, Paul Robeson the same. Then my father was his successor, and he fought for the same types of issues, but he walked in the ethos. The bishop is able to do the work that he's able to do because the congregation understood that even before he ascended. It was a part of the theology of the church. My father had that same advantage, and now I am able to be aggressive in community development as well as we continue to reach beyond the walls. Because of our forerunners, they laid the foundation. It's an ethos that we are walking in, almost like the scripture that says we live, move, and have our being in God. We live, move, and have our being in this idea that church goes beyond Sunday morning.
Yeah. So you both referenced economic development there, and I want to talk just a little about how important that is. You know, a lot of people would say, that's not the church's job, that's government's job. Or that's not the church's job, that's the chamber's job or business group. It's their responsibility, or it's other social organizations. But talk about why, especially for the Black community, the church is this incredible engine of economic development and opportunity. Bishop Ellis?
Well, I would say that it's always been. You know, when you think about the church coming out of slavery, the church was that gathering place, even on the plantation down by the riverside. Think about the songs that they sing, those spiritual songs and hymns. I'm going to lay down my burdens down by the riverside. Those were gathering places. And many times those songs that they sang were messages that they were sharing one with another that the slave masters did not understand and could not comprehend. So the church was always that place of trust for Black people. It was always that place of integrity for Black people. It was always that place where you knew that you could get a fair deal. You knew that you can get somebody who would be sensitive to your plight and to your situation and would not just, you know, lay hands on you and pray for you, you know, and give you a spiritual high and then, you know, release you and say, hey, make it for yourself. It was always that institution that wrapped its arms around you. And I would say that we've always been family here in the Black church. You know, that's why this pandemic is really affecting us emotionally, probably in a greater way than maybe some Caucasian or other congregations, because, you know, African Americans, man, you know, we touchy-feely people, you know. I mean, when Black people shake hands, man, it's like 5 minutes, you know, you got all this and then a snap at the end, 2 minutes later, you know, other folks just shake hands, keep moving on, because we like touching one another, and we're that touchy-feely kind of, we hug and we embrace, and, you know, we care about our brother and our sister because, again, we know the burden and we know the plight of not having enough and just barely making it. And that's why we've always been, you know, an economic engine as well. We want to see our people educated. We want to see them be able to apply for jobs. And listen, I give credit to the UAW and to a lot of institutions, and thank God that we have people like you and others in places of influence, that when opportunities come, you bring it to the church and say, you know, Bishop, I need 20 good people, you know, and I'm going to give them a break on your integrity and on your word, you know, and that's what we've been blessed to have probably in the last 30 or 40 years. And that's made a tremendous difference in people in our congregations, which is our community, getting a fair shake on the American dream.
Yeah. Reverend Adams?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a powerful question, because this is a cross that the church has been compelled to bear. We have to be so many people, counselors, preachers, pastors, economic developers. We have to, employment agencies, we have to have so many roles and so many hats because of the necessity of access to it. Now, if somebody has a emotional crisis in a wealthy neighborhood, they hire a psychoanalyst at $200 or $300 an hour or more, and they make an appointment. These are a lot of those appointments we feel ourselves, and we walk people through changes and challenges in life because we have to, because people can afford that. But it's a role that we gladly play. We start the engine for economic development because corporations are skittish about coming into the community and paying the black tax. We have to make the case that you can make money in the African American community. And when they can't get the small business loans, they have to come to Bishop Credit Union because they can't get the money elsewhere. And we have to create the opportunities that are in other communities just because of the demographic differences. So we have to play that role. Now, the question is, for me, Stephen, when do we start making sure that we compel the government to do their job? Because we shouldn't have to play all these roles. It's the government's job to make sure everybody has access to fair housing. It's the government's job. We're paying taxes just like everybody else. This myth that African Americans are just somehow living off the fat of the land and we're not paying any taxes is a lie. And many of the economic development entities that we're talking about in engines pay taxes. And look, the government has to provide equal access to healthcare. The government has to provide equal access to education. The government has to provide equal access to opportunity. And we have to continue to pressure them to do it. We have to march. We have to continue to fight. We have to continue to advocate. And ultimately, it will help everybody. Injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere. And now Officer Chauvin's getting a little taste of the system that he allowed to run on over African Americans, right? I hope they give him mercy at his sentencing, because I want to make the same case for African Americans who are overcharged and oversentenced. We have to say, look, why are we dealing with COVID-19? Pandemics that's part of life. Communicable diseases are just a part of life. It's the medical delivery system that has forgotten the poor. So we can't be satisfied with the union in America and then no unionization in poor nations, because the companies just go to where the poor nations are and exploit them. We can't be satisfied with healthcare in America and then no healthcare delivery in other nations, because if they get sick there, with transportation being the way it is, we're going to get sick here. And even within our country, we have third world living conditions right here in America. You know, we want to talk about we are the world and go over to Africa and help them. We got kids that need our help in Detroit, in Watts, in Cabrini Green, in if they still have Cabrini Green, I think they got projects in Scotland. But where we got kids that need help right here. But we have to force the government to fulfill their role.
Okay, Bishop Ellis and Pastor Adams. It's rare on this show that we have two such huge figures, not just in the religious community, but in Detroit generally. I'm really glad you joined us for this conversation.